Cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, James Science.
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of From the Dust podcast. I'm your host, James Science. Whatever you are, whatever you do, you're highly favored, highly blessed. If you have a testimony, a story you want to share, go ahead and hit me up From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told. Voices need to be heard. Well, today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to every now and then throw in an episode of my story, some of the things that I went through, some of the people that had influence on my life, whether it was in the ministry, growing up, or in general. And today I want to get started on talking about, my older brother and the effect he had on my life, the example he led to me growing up, and just some of the things he did for me growing up, and how it affected my life, and why I do some of the things I am today, and some of the lessons I learned through his life. So if you had ever listened to some of my previous episodes about growing up PK, we talk about him, my brothers, my dad, we mentioned him. He passed away, my older brother, and is around his mid-30s, and he's always I've always looked up to him, as my older brother, and some of the things he did for me, and what it basically did for me. So, yeah, I seen my brother, grow up in ministry. He led by example times. I seen him back up my pops and the drums and worship. I seen him travel the world to start churches, pioneering. But I also seen him run the streets, running the street gang, the use of drugs. So it was a mixture that I bared witness to. Some of the things that I picked up on and I learned through that, and some of the things that I did want to do, and some of the things that I didn't want to do. But ever since I can remember, man, he always did what it took. He always did something to make sure that his siblings were okay, or his siblings were happy and taken care of. And I just want to share some of the things he did as a kid for me when I was younger. I remember one year, I was young and I was tiny, man. And I can remember him taking a trip to the snow. Me being too young, wanting to go, couldn't go. And I asked him to bring me back some snow. And just wanted to see what it was and what it was like, So he took a chest, and from what I remember being said and told, he filled it up. By the time it got back, it was melted, but he tried, and those are some of the things that he did. Might didn't work out the way he worked out. He still tried. And just like, I've seen him back up my pops in ministry, playing the drums, at a young age, and I haven't seen that. Gave me an idea and thoughts about doing the same in a certain way, That's one of the things, inspirations that I picked up the bass, and later on in time began to play worship music. Began a love of music. Because I seen him play in bands. I seen his taste in music, everything from the Beatles to Stained, to Mariah Carey, all that stuff. His taste in music fluctuated. And that's why I learned many types of genres: hip hop, jazz, oldies. He fed that to me, and I picked up on it. That's why now I have a love of very types of music. But as you grow up, sometimes people change and people live a different lifestyle. All that suddenly, not suddenly, but gradually change. The people he was around, the people he hung out with, the way that he spoke, the way that he dressed, the way that he presented himself. Though his love for his family never changed. Never. That was always number one priority. And I can remember one of the times where I knew that it was changing, because he was starting to cause trouble. I don't remember what for, but started going, I think, in and out of a juvenile facility for a while. But I can remember one day hanging out with falling in the glass pipe. I was young, didn't know what it was, but knowing it was something that this wasn't right. And that's when everything started to change, because he started hanging out with the neighborhood gang. Not a neighborhood, but a gang that was in the neighborhood, and eventually joined the gang. And him living that lifestyle and all that stuff that it comes with, all that drama, all that lifestyle that it brings you, it caused a rift in the family, because he wasn't doing what we were being taught biblically and ministerially wise, and him wanting to live that lifestyle kind of pushed him away, you would say. Cops are called, things are being done, arguments, fights. And I was maybe 12, 13, 14 at the 15, maybe at the oldest. And I remember he was one of the bravest. He was one of the bravest people I've ever met in my life. Never would back down from anybody or anything. I seen him take on 3 people, come out on top. I seen him take out one person, and take a loss, And one of the things that he did for me growing up, or I will always remember, is when I started hanging out with some neighborhood dudes. They were part of a certain set in a neighborhood that we lived at the time. And I only hung out with them because of one of the dude's sisters I liked. I was young. I liked her, so she was always around. So you always use that as an excuse to be around. But that's what gave me my first taste of the street life. I had my first joint of marijuana, or first cigarette. And that's where I seen my first act of gang violence. So I just started hanging out with them, not even causing us trouble, just being a knucklehead, little runt in the neighborhood, and started giving me a nickname, and them asking me questions. What would I do? Would do this? Would you do this? My brother, he caught word of it. Then I'm hanging out with this certain group, right? So he goes up to maybe that was like 6 or 7 of them at the time, and says, my brother is going to be part of the set. This isn't the life for him. If you got a problem, I'll take you all on. And that's why he was. He was down like that, you know what I mean? Bold, not afraid to back down. You know, you win some, you lose some. But he was doing that for me not to make the same mistakes he did at the time. Not to get involved with the life. Not having to worry, stress your mother out. You know, when something goes down, having a question, well, where's my son? You know, where is he? Like, he didn't want me putting that pressure on the family as he did at the time. Now, there came a point in time where he eventually left the house and started living his life, you know, working and doing other things. But he had always made time to see his brothers, always made time to do something. And I can remember this is one of the last years where I played basketball and we won undefeated that year. Pretty cool. But he would always seem to be always at my practices. No matter what it was, he was always there. Would see him in the corner, you know, watching me and being there supportively, you know. And I remember her being here at my games when I didn't have my parents there. He was my support. He was there. Him and his friends cheering me on at times. He did that. He gave me support, wanting me to push myself further when playing, you know, and those are some of the small things I would always remember about him, what he did as a brother, you know. But yet, at the same time, you push him, get to a point where he do whatever it takes to take care of his family. There was an instance where there was a certain group picking on my younger brother. And he picks me up from school and says, get in the car. So we go and we're headed to the direction of my brother's school at the time. Me just thinking we're going to pick him up. We're going to go for a ride. We're going to probably get something to eat like we used to do when he was around the area and had time. But he was tired of his brothers getting picked on. He was tired. You know, he wasn't going to have it, really. So we go, and he says, isn't a good example, but it's an example in itself. This is when I received my first pistol. Didn't tell many people about it, but yeah, he gave me my first gun. And yeah, so he figured out who the people were. And he rolled up, man, and he said, anybody messes with my brother again, you're gonna answer to me. And he pulls out a mini sort of a shotgun. And yeah, you know, needless to say, nobody ever messed with my brother again. You know, there was a certain level where nobody crossed, you know. And as dramatic and as high as I was, that's who he was. He wasn't gonna let nobody. That's who, you know. And he had another one. I was well, I want to say jumped or beaten them by two brothers, and me running to my house. And luckily, my brother was there visiting my mom, and I let him know, you know. And we went, and we found them walking home from school, and me thinking, oh yeah, it's my brother. He's gonna handle it for me. He's gonna take care of it. You know, he's gonna do me justice. But he stopped him, went out, confronted him, and he told me, I'm gonna fight them each one on one. You know, not to let him down. If I lose, then I'm gonna answer to him and toughen me up. I had some training, kickboxing, so it helped. And I put in my dirt, and I did him justice. And you could just see the smile on his face, and for the situation, it's a smile, and how happy he was. And me, young, and me having to look up to my brother, seeing me, him happy, that just gives you an exhilaration, gives you a feeling like, yeah, I did this, he's happy, and you want to do that. You want to impress him. You want to do what's best. You want to see that happen, And, like I said, I've seen him in ministry. I've seen him help many people, no matter what situation he was in, always take care of people, take care of his friends, hard times. But I've also seen him at a bad time. I've seen him get to the extremes. I seen him and heard him pull triggers. You know what I mean? He had to. I've been in a situation with him where we were chased. And he did what he needed to do to survive, make sure we were okay. Later on in time, man, drugs and all this stuff starts having an effect on your life, and it gradually downgrades from who he was. I remember him working for certain families, personal security, high profile families, stars, having a good job, working for good companies, just not no mediocre security firms, man. People with influence, people with money, organizations. He worked for a certain wrestling organization to where we'd be in line and we wouldn't have to pay because he was Jon Jon. He was a brother. People knew who he was, and we just walk right out of him like nothing. Just the person he was, real humble. People gave him a lot of love and respect for who he was and what he did for people. Years go on, man, and then the drugs get worse. I seen him outrun dozen cops. I seen him get caught. All that changes, man, and all that has an effect on both lives. You see this going on and not knowing what to say at a young age, not knowing what to do. Growing up yourself, not understanding what drugs can do to your life. What can it do to your family? What it can do to your body? What can it do to your mind? And later on in life, it got the best of him, where I'll explain a little bit later as we go on through this episode. I see him at his best. I seen him at his worst. I mean, seen that not wanting to pick up certain drugs, not wanting to do certain things, so I wouldn't put my family through that when I had one. Not wanting to be in that situation. Though I had to witness it, it was a lesson in itself. No matter what I do or try to talk to him, no matter what anybody did or tried, couldn't get it out of him. So blinded and so hooked by a drug that consumed his life, consumed his soul, consumed everything. One of the best things I can remember about him is when I was at the time married at the time. He lived in New Mexico and he came. He had to go get away, change his life. And at that time there, he little bit turned his life around, got better, got back on his feet for a while. And I remember going out there not just myself, at the time, I went out there by myself with my brother, and I can remember being there and playing football in the snow, and the dead snow, cold, but still having fun. And that's when he got a little bit better over there, and those are the good times, no sweaters, just pure cold. It was cold, but we were having fun, so we went through it. I remember going out there, taking our drama out there, and me being able to not just minister to the people out there, but him being in the crowd and be able to minister to him. You know, him seeing the group, driving the team, portray a life that he could have been living, seeing the emotions on his face, seeing his life portrayed basically on stage, and his brothers, his family, his friends portraying that, conveying a message to the people, seeing the tears in his eyes. And I believe later in life that we were able to plant a seed in his life to ultimately, before his death, when he gave his life to Christ, just before he passed. And I want to have a few pictures of him. This is him right here. And these are, I have a few more, but these are the ones I have printed out that I have. You know, to me, he was always the best. And my son remembers him. They were young when he passed, younger, but still old enough to remember him. One of the best things that ever touched my heart about it was when my son James, it was his birthday. We were just, he was young. We came back from a soccer game, and he happened to be in the city, Visalia area, as was my family, friends, family. Came back from a soccer game. It was his birthday, and he was excited. You know, my boy was excited. It's my birthday, you know, and my brother was running the streets at the time here. And yeah, my brother, man, didn't want him to go without. No matter, my brother didn't have anything, hardly anything, because he was living a life of the streets. And that's what it comes with, you know. Sometimes you have, sometimes you don't when you live that kind of lifestyle. But reach into his pocket, man, and give my son his last 20, and I knew that's all he had. And I was like I said, it's okay, he's fine, he has everything he needs, you know, but he refused not to give it to him. You know, that was his last 20 for the day. Maybe he needed it for his drug, maybe he needed it for food. But for that moment, in that time, he went without, so it was the death he could have. You know, and he just taking the lessons and learning that I don't want to get to a point where I got to live that lifestyle. Fast forward, man, years to where ultimately the drug, heroin, meth, whatever it was, consumed his life. Gets to a point where he gets sick and can no longer, body can take it. You know, and it said before he witnesses and people were around, before he got sick, before he knew something was wrong, that he cried out to God, asked God to forgive him, asked the Lord to come into his life, to change him, make him new. See, he knew growing up in ministry, being saved, being sanctified, set free, giving your life, giving your heart to God is one of the steps to ultimately being in paradise. Though he chose to do it at the end, did it. And so yeah, at the end he passed away, you know. Didn't die in his sin anymore. Didn't die of this worldly sin. Wasn't consumed at the moment of that drug, of that poison, you know, but was accepted to the kingdom of Christ. What do I'm saying? What I'm saying is, do you know anybody out there, man, that's hooked, that's blinded, that is struggling with addiction, running the streets? Reach out, plant that seed. Let them know Christ loves them. Let them go, God loves them. Give them compassion, prayer, intercede. Pray without ceasing. Believe God is going to change your loved one. No matter the situation, no matter, keep fighting. Years, my parents prayed. Years we prayed. God to come in and change his life. At that very last moment, it happened. Don't give up. Press in. I want to thank everybody for all the support, for listening to the episodes, all the support, all the feedback. It helps me, push me to want to do more stuff solo like this, as I would do, as continue having on guests with stories and testimonials. A God can move, change a person's life. God is good. God is great. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit me from it. This podcast at outlook.com. That's from it. This podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told, and voices, they need to be heard.
Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things become new.
Again, if you can go to your platform of choice, whether it's Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, leave us a 5-star rating, a comment, share us. All that does is help us get in higher in the libraries, helps the show get seen. So you know what? We can spare this message of Christ further. People can see it. People can hear it. They can see how God can move again and change your life through our testimonials and stories. See you again on the Dust Podcast. Yeah.